All right, well, I think we have done enough setup for now, and we're actually going to write some code today. If you've watched my previous videos, we've been setting up everything to get started, and if you haven't seen them, then go ahead and check out this playlist somewhere around here, and that'll get you all set up to start. If you're already ready to go, then the time has finally come, and we're actually going to write some code. So the first thing we're going to do is write a program to get to know each other just a little bit more. Our program is going to ask some questions, and we'll be able to answer back, and the program will use our responses to answer back to us and ask more questions. So let's go and jump into it. Alrighty. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open Visual Studio Code. That's right here. And let's see. So I usually open a folder first, which I have one open here, and that just makes it easier for me to keep an eye on what files I have open and create new ones, and that way I can access whatever I'm working on and save it to a certain location and be able to work on it in Visual Studio Code. So like right now, I'm gonna go ahead and create a new file. And you wanna kind of name your files something that where you're gonna know what you're talking about. So in this case, we're gonna be creating a custom greeting through Python. So I'm gonna go ahead and name it greeting, and with the .py extension. And that makes it known that it's a Python file, just like that. So you can press enter and it opens the file right here. Now don't worry about these two files right here. This is for my GitHub stuff. And we'll go into that in a later video, but it doesn't affect your Python video. You don't need it right now. So if you don't have those files, you're totally fine to just keep on working. All right, so now the first thing I do in writing my code is I usually do pseudocode. And pseudocode is basically just a way for you to logically figure out what your code's gonna do and have sections for it, and to be able to then write your code easily and keep it organized. So all you do is you use the little hashtag symbol there, and you will, what that does is creates a comment. So the comment, whenever you run your code, will get ignored by Python, so it won't actually try and run whatever you say there. It's really useful to write more information about your code if you're going to, or pseudocode in this case. So if you come back to look at your code later on, or someone else looks at your code, it can be really easy to then look at what you have commented and say, oh, this does that. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're just gonna say hello. And you can see right there, it doesn't have any color to it. So that'll be nice for when we do it. All right, so that's the first thing we're gonna do. And the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna ask for their name. So let's go ahead and go ask for name. And then I'm gonna go down, add another comment, and say, then I'm gonna do a formal greeting like we've actually just been introduced. We've gathered the information, so now we're gonna have a formal greeting. All right, now the next thing, since we're getting to know each other just a little bit more, we're gonna go ahead and ask for your age. Now I know that might be kind of taboo some places, but I'm all right with sharing if you are. So we're gonna go ahead and go the comment and ask for age. All right, and after that, we're gonna go ahead and say something along kind of like, that's a good age or something like that. But we're also gonna add something else, and we're gonna actually add numbers together and count for the next year. So we're gonna say, acknowledge age, I guess. Hopefully I'm spelling this right. And say the next year. So this is not only going to know what age you are, but it's also going to calculate what the next year is. And then we're going to say goodbye. Okay, so we've gotten our code. This is pseudocode. So you can see it's just basically an outline of what I want to do in my code. This is really useful when you have an idea of something you want to do and you don't know exactly what the code is going to do, but as you start writing your code, you want to be able to remember logical steps that you're going to take, and this can be really helpful in that. So the first thing we're going to do is use what's called a print function in Python. So print, just like that, open and close parentheses. VS Code automatically adds the other end to things like parentheses. But you can see here that VS Code, it gives you some good information. So this lets you know what the print function is right here, what it accepts, and then also gives you some information about it. So you can always use that to understand what you're doing, what function you're going to use. Now the print statement here, you're going to add the quotation marks here, and we're just going to say hello. Right, so the next thing we're going to do is our next pseudocode, and we're going to ask for somebody's name. All right, so the print statement only outputs strings. It only outputs a message. So what we need to do is we actually need to get input, and Python's really self-explanatory, and all that is an input function. Right here, open and close parentheses, the same thing. And you can see the prompt, and you can read some of the help right here, and it reads a string to then take an input. And actually, before we move that, we're going to store the input in what's called a variable. Now, if you remember in one of my past videos, I mentioned variables very briefly. What variables do is they store a value that you put into it so you can reuse later on in your code. And we're going to use that here. And we're going to name our variable something that is going to be self-explanatory. And in this case, we're asking for a name. So we're going to name our variable name. We use the equal sign, so name equals an input. Right? And then we're going to actually define the message we want to prompt the user for whenever they're going to input that. And said, what is your name? Question mark and a little space there, and you'll see why in just a second. But for the next thing, we're going to move on to our next section of code. We've got our name. So now we're going to do our formal greeting. And we're going to use the print statement again. And in this case, it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to add an F before the quotation marks. Now what the F right there is going to allow us to do is going to allow us to add our variable into the string and use it in the output. So you'll see here, we're going to go hi, and we're going to do wrap it in curly braces like this, name, which is our variable, comma, it's very nice to meet you. Okay, now we've got that section done. So we have our formal greeting, and we're going to ask for the age. So same thing again, we're going to store it in a variable equals using the input. How old are you? Space. Okay, so now we have that, and we're gonna acknowledge the age next, right? So we've got our age stored here, we have our name, and actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and use our variable. So, remember we have to go back here, add F, and right here, and we're gonna add the curly braces and name. All right, so we're gonna make it more personable. That's a little bit better. Because nobody doesn't not like, if you could even understand that sentence, nobody doesn't not like to hear their name over and over again as you're being spoken to. All right, so we're gonna use the new variable, new age, equals age plus 1. Okay, so as you can see, we're gonna do a little bit of math here, and all we're doing is adding 1, so it's not crazy math, but when you're adding things together and you're thinking about how you're going to write your program, you have to understand that you're going to use different data types. I mentioned earlier that these are strings. These are wrapped in quotation marks, and those are what are called strings. That's a specific data type, and you can do specific things with different data types. Now, this is going to be a number, right? So the numbers you can do different things with, like add them together to do math. And that can be really, really useful when you're writing programs to accomplish different things, because math is a kind of important deal, especially if you're going to calculate things, which you need numbers for. So in this case, new age is going to be a number, and we're then going to write our message, print, and we're going to use our variable. So we want to make sure we do F, open and close quotation marks, and we're going to say right off the bat, age, which is our current age, isn't a bad year, because it's not a bad year. Now, why not? I here, that's not how you spell here. New age, and you can actually see that we have access to that variable. So you can press tab instead of having to type everything out and it'll autofill it. Isn't a bad year either. All right, next we're just gonna say goodbye. And for that, we're gonna use another print statement. Whoops. Oh, that's actually a good lesson. So right here, you can see that I used a capital P at the print statement, but you can see that Python is suggesting this with a lowercase p. Python is case sensitive. So if you're going to call a function or you're going to use a variable, you have to make sure that what you're typing is exactly as it says before, or that the function is named exactly that. If I try to use this, it won't work the same way that it's meant to. If there's another function that I made that's called print and it has a capital P, that'll work the way that I intended and it won't call that way. If I tried to use new age, but I didn't use this capital A here, then it wouldn't work because those are two different variables as far as Python's concerned. So we need to make sure that we do this. Open and close parentheses, and you can see that it changed the colors there, so obviously it recognizes it now. And F, because we're gonna use our name again. I've had a great time. Open and close curly braces, name. I hope you have a great rest of your day. All right, so now we have all of our requirements met from our pseudocode. This looks like it's gonna be it. So we're gonna go ahead and give it a run. If you remember from my last video, you can use your keyboard shortcuts, and it's a good idea to get into a habit because later on, it's gonna make things a lot easier as you get into things like debugging. So this will also work. You can click this play button up here. So if you do choose to do that, that's fine. It's not a big deal. I do keyboard shortcuts because again, later on it's gonna help. So we're gonna run it and we're gonna accept it as a Python file. Right here, you're gonna see the output start to go. All right, so it's gonna load up. All right, there we go. We have our first thing, right? So hello, what is your name? And we're paused right here at the input. So it's waiting for us to say what our name is. And you can name it whatever you want it to be. You can be ridiculous or you can say your actual name. So my name is Chase. And now you press enter. How old are you, Chase? Oh, hi, Chase. It's very nice to meet you. Look at that, it's so nice. I write such polite programs. Okay. How old are you name, right? So now we're back here again, right? So how old are you? And I use my name and it's waiting for input. So we need to give it a number, we need to give it my age. I am 29. If you say I look that old, then I guess maybe at least it's not looking older. Okay, so we have an error right here. This is called an exception, or it throws an error, which means there's something wrong with your code. And in this case, you can look at the error message and read it. And it says, exception has occurred, type error, can only concatenate a string, not an integer. Remember I said that there are different data types? So this is supposed to be an integer, right? So it can't add these two together because this actually outputs a string. If we want that to come out as an integer, we have to specifically say that that's an integer, right? So in this case, now we have to stop it. And what we're gonna do is use Python, a built-in function, to convert that to an integer. So a number, we're gonna convert it to a number. And that's just called int. Now you do open parentheses and close parentheses right there. So this int, when this gets interpreted, it's gonna say that no, this isn't a string anymore. This is actually a number, so use it as a number. All right, so that should work again. I'm gonna use function key and F5. I'm gonna run it as a Python file right here. All right, so the program runs just like it's brand new again. It starts at the top, runs down, and it's not gonna store your information unless you specifically tell it to, so we have to fill everything out again. My name is Chase. It is nice to meet you too. 29 years old. Oh, all right, so that was really fast, and I'm gonna do something that we don't need to, but so you can actually see the full program run. I'm gonna add an input function here and an empty string, just so it'll pause at the end and I can press enter and do it. So we'll run it. And we're back again. Hello, what is your name? Chase. I'm 29. Oh, see, all right, so we're right here, and you can see the entire program that's run. We've gathered a little information from us, we've had a little conversation, and we're getting to know each other a little bit better. Right? So this is a really simple example of a program you can run, and you can build, and it has quite a bit in there. We've talked about functions, we've talked about data types, we've talked about calculations, we've talked about inputs and outputs, we've talked about formatting strings. There's a ton, even in just these basic little exercises. So, I'm not gonna answer my phone. They don't even know how to answer it. Okay, back to you. So that's our program, and we can just press enter and it'll wrap it up. All right, so that's it. We're all done on that side. Alrighty, so that's the video for today, guys. I really hope you learned something, and go ahead and write your own programs that will ask your own questions, and you can put in your own answers and responses. If you did enjoy the video, go ahead and just smash the like button, and on your way out, if you wouldn't mind just tapping the subscribe button, that'd be just great. But now it's time for my regular scheduled awkward walk off, and if you have any ideas for outros, or if you want to let me know what you actually wrote your programs about, that'd be even better, because I think I'm hopeless on the outro part. Well, until next time. If you're already ready, so it's okay to so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Ooh, that was a terrible spin.